The Edmonton Oilers thumped the Vancouver Canucks 6-2 tonight in the second game of Connor McDavid's 3-game suspension, and frankly, it didn't really matter from the start.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers, I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. So on today's victory edition of Locked On Oilers, going to break down why this win was so meaningful and the narrative surrounding the game were weird, but it's a worthwhile conversation. Leon's great game. The pass he makes to set up the first goal of this game is obnoxious. There's maybe one other player on the planet who can make it. And then we'll wrap talking about why the division race, why these 4-point games are so crucial, and why, frankly, you got to stay insular and you got to be able to keep things in the room where it's only about the guys on the guys on the boat with you, the guys rowing in the same direction. So, starting off, anytime anything happens with the best player in a sport, there is going to be a media firestorm. As we are all living through in today's landscape, media content is driven by engagement. What can get an audience to react? And we have almost 40 years, 50 years now of high-level television data sampling. We know what on TV, what on social media. We can get a really refined answer as to what makes people not change the channel, what makes people stay on that station longer, and what makes them want to engage with content. And definitively, we know any type of content that provokes, an emotional reaction is going to inspire someone to stay on that content longer. And the more you incite them, the more you piss them off or rile them up in a positive way, the longer they're going to stay and the more likely they are to engage with your stuff in the future. And you saw that bubble out of control over the last 2.5 days. I thought what Connor McDavid said in his media availability was perfectly reasonable. Frankly, it's exactly what I said. He said he knows he can't react that way, but if the referees were consistent and called the game the same way they do in the first period as they do in the third period, we wouldn't have an issue, and there wouldn't have needed to, and McDavid wouldn't have lashed out, and he wouldn't have had that moment of frustration boil over to a breaking point. And again, not saying it's okay, not saying I condone it. I understand. And not only did McDavid lose 3 games. He couldn't play tonight. He's got to sit one more before he's able to return to the lineup. You get to play the team that the incident happened against 3.5 days later. And the Canucks are a wounded team. Their marquee player, Elias Pettersson's name has been in trade rumors, though the Canucks keep saying they want to try and hold on to him. We'll see what ends up happening with JT Miller, but in days of our Canucks, the ongoing soap opera, they still have to go out there and play hockey games. And for the Oilers, who have responded and bounced back very well from that slow start where they came out of the gate 5-1, didn't really have a whole lot going for them, atrocious power play, middling penalty kill, and instead, they have found where they need to be. And tonight's win is a really strong endorsement of the aggregate of the parts. And yesterday did an episode about the Oilers offense. Are they going to score enough? Are they scoring enough? Do they have the depth? Is there too much offense relying on a handful of guys? And I still think the Oilers have a little bit of room as far as players having some positive regression. Zach Hyman, Adam Henrique, Kasperi Kapanen, all having goals tonight. That bodes well. And my goal for the Oilers tonight, and in fairness, I probably should have started with this. My goal for the Oilers tonight was to get the best kind of revenge there is for being wronged, and that's winning. I know there are Oiler fans listening or watching this who watched the game and said, we should have took a run at Garland. We should have really sent a message about what happens when you mess with our best player. And I can empathize and understand that position. It is a strong emotional reaction, and I can get why what happened to McDavid provoking that reaction from you. I get it wholeheartedly. I do. That is your most important player, the face of the franchise, the face of the sport. The Canucks were taking liberties with him, and you feel, based on the way hockey used to be, or still is in some places, that there needs to be an eye for an eye. And instead of shenanigans, and don't get me wrong, Corey Perry was being miserable all night to the Canucks, and they deserved it. And you play within the confines of the rules, and most importantly, not only did you win this game, you absolutely stomped the Canucks out, and then you made them rub their noses in it for a period and a half. When you get out to the kind of monster lead that the Oilers had in this game, we're not talking about, can the Canucks make this hairy? Can they start mounting a comeback? We're talking about how many goals are the Oilers going to score tonight? We're talking about how many guys can we get a point on the stat sheet tonight. Shout out Noah Phillip, who picked up another NHL point tonight, got an assist on one of the Hyman goals. The best medicine for revenge is being better. And this is a very moral argument, ethical argument, but in sports, and frankly in life, I should say that teams can respond to these types of situations in one of two ways. They can go eye for an eye, or they can do the difficult thing. They can be responsible, they can turn the other cheek, and they can focus on winning the game. I know from time to time when teams feel like they're wronged, they will overcompensate in the other direction, and they will get too much involved in the chicanery and the shenanigans, and they get distracted. They're not having as much attention to detail, and that starts to bleed into how you're playing minute after minute, game after game. And look, the Oilers had their fun tonight. This is how you get your revenge against a team that wrongs you. Sure. Would you like to knock Connor Garland on his ass? Yeah, I get it. 100%. I get it. Most and beautifully, and I'll tee this up nicely to go into the second segment. That first goal, Connor Garland is trying to make a play against Nurse and against Draisaitl, and they both shrug him off like a bug. Draisaitl makes a pass that maybe one or two other players in the world can make to Hyman through the neutral zone. Hyman makes a power move, beats both Canuck defenders, tattoos one in the back of the net, and you're off to the races at that point. The first goal in this game swung so much for the Oilers, and we're going to take our first break of today's show. When we come back, we're going to talk about how the offense got going, why the Canucks were so vulnerable, and a whole lot more, so be sure to stick around. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite moments of last year was going to see Blink-182 with my best friends. You see childhood favorite band with your best friends you've known basically your whole life. That's one of those memories I'm going to have forever. And now Gametime has made it even easier for you to make those great experiences to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming event for my birthday. My friends and I were talking. We wanted to go to a game. We're going to go to Devils Golden Knights the day after my birthday. And using Gametime, we found some amazing deals with the Gametime Picks, and we could even see the view from our seats before we bought them. The Super Deal in particular was impressive, offering great seats at an unbeatable price. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Friday victory edition of Locked On Oilers, talking about the big 6-2 win over the Canucks. And there's nothing better than that. In sports, you get so many chances to get your lick back. And in the course of a long season, sometimes it's hard to get up for an individual game, to be motivated, to be fully engaged. We all have those days where we sit down at our desk or whatever we do at work, and the gears just aren't firing. You know, the neurons aren't working, no matter how much coffee you drink, no matter how much of a how good of a snack you bring with you. Nothing's working. And sometimes it's hard to find that gear to get going. And tonight wasn't one of those nights for the Oilers. Just from the very start, they had some juice in them. The crowd absolutely helped. And I won't say indifferent on home ice in the NHL. I do think it matters significantly less than it used to because of the cultural changes, the just sports going experience in general has now, that it's just hard for a lot of people to get to games, and a certain demographic seems to be overtaking in a majority of these big markets. But crowd had juice tonight. You heard it on, go back and if you watch the highlights, when that pass gets from Draisaitl, who is at the Oilers net, he is parallel to Calvin Pickard at the goal line. He backhands that pass to the opposite blue line, to the offensive zone blue line. He's able to backhand it. Hyman recovers it cleanly, and they're off. And as we've discussed almost weekly, maybe even gamely, on Locked On Oilers, when the Oilers score first, it's where they get to you at your weakest, and it's where they become downright lethal. The Oilers record coming into tonight, when they score first, 17-4-3. You can make that 18-4-3. And frankly, it was just good to see the Oilers score first in a game. It's been a while. The Oilers have really struggled to get that first goal on the board in any game as of late, but playing against a team that has a little bit of juice because they beat you a few days prior, they think, oh, well, McDavid's not here, we're going to figure it out. And against the Capitals, the Oilers had a hard time getting through to dangerous areas. They couldn't really drive the net a whole lot. When they did, Logan Thompson was able to make plays. And tonight, the Oilers did a great job of putting pressure on the Canucks and making them actively play defense. And we know this. The Canucks defensively are not great. Quinn Hughes is having a remarkable season. I think he should be the Norris frontrunner as we sit here on January 24th, but he's one guy. And Philip Roenick just came back from an injury that had been holding him out from the lineup for a while. The goal he scored tonight was absolute ripper. Nothing Pickard could have done there. But when you have the game advantage of having the lead, then you have the personnel advantage of playing a team that's weak defensively, and you can put those players in inopportune positions, and you can really make them have to make plays. And that's really the key to offense in today's NHL. You want to put that other team, the defense, the defending team, in conflict. You want to get that goalie moving laterally. You want to get those defensemen deciding, do I need to go down to a knee? Do I need to full snow angel? Do I stay on my feet? Do I reach? Do I keep back skating? Do I try and step up? The more variables you can introduce to a given play makes it harder for that defender. And when you're playing with a lead, as the Oilers were tonight, it sets you up to keep attacking, because as a game goes along, teams start to find a gear of desperation, and the Canucks are not a very well-structured team, as you saw tonight. So the harder they press to try and find a goal to get back in this game, the more they were opened up. And it's really an environmental factor. We know that hockey in particular, when you are playing with a lead, the other team has to actively concede defense to try and create more offense. That's just the way the sport works. You can make concessions, tactical concessions, and say, well, we have a lead. We should try and maybe play a little more defense first and be a little more conservative. Or if you're trailing, you have to make the conscious decision of, well, I'm going to need this defenseman to start pinching a little bit sooner. I'm going to need our guys to be stepping up at the blue line to try and make our transition shorter. You know, if you make that play in the neutral zone, you step up and you only got to go 30 feet across the neutral zone as opposed to the length of the ice to get to the offensive zone. That makes a difference in the course of a long game. But tonight, you got chip-ins from your important players. You know, Leon's goal on the power play, I mean, what else can you say? He's on one knee, falling over, and he absolutely beats Demko clean. It's a remarkable play. And look, if you're listening to this, I'm going to assume you are an Oilers fan, you are a general hockey fan, or you're a sicko Canuck fan. And if you happen to be a sicko Canuck fan watching this because you want to see the talking points that the Oilers are using to try and justify the McDavid suspension, whatever. I don't know. I feel like my McDavid suspension take is reasonable, but I saw a lot of Canuck fans whining on Twitter, whining on Blue Sky about the officiating in this game. And look, I don't think the officiating was great. I think the officiating in general in the NHL is pretty bad. I don't think that's a controversial or frankly difficult take to come to. And now look, I know there is a perception that when you do stuff like this, when you complain to the league or you have something that happens with the officials, it goes one of two ways for you. If you remember the play a couple years ago where the Flames defenseman hit high stick the referee and suddenly the Flames started getting called for every ticky-tack penalty, you can say that's anecdotal. You could say there's a correlation. Tonight, after McDavid, the best player in the world, and you saw what Sidney Crosby had to say and a couple other guys around the league said about protecting the stars. And, well, do we want to see the star players make plays or do we want to stay stuck in the past? And the Oilers got more power plays tonight. They converted on 2 of them. When you have that happen, you get 2 on the man advantage in one game. There's a good chance you're going to win the game outright. And managing the game, managing the game as an official is a hard job. I have always said I would like them to referee, not manage, but it worked out in the Oilers' favor tonight. And I'll leave you with this if you happen to be a sicko Canuck fan. You got to play better than the officials officiate, because if you leave it in the hands of the officials, we know they're not as good at their jobs as the professional athletes are. I would always rather say, I left it all out there and we lost, as opposed to, well, the referees jobbed us. That's just not how it works. I don't think the referees make a conscious decision of, well, that's it, we're screwing the Canucks tonight. I don't think that's how this works. Do I think over the course of the game? Yeah. Do I think maybe there was a conversation from the league before this game about, hey, guys, no shenanigans tonight as far as sending a message to the referees to talk to the teams before the game? That does happen from time to time. This is a good win. If you are an Oilers fan, this is about as good as it's going to get as far as stomping someone out. You know, the win last week, the massive come from behind victory, I would say, I said at the time that was the best win of the season. But tonight, that it doesn't really get better than stomping out a divisional opponent who wronged you not that long ago without your best player. You add all that up, it's a great win. We're going to take one more break on today's show. We're going to talk about why winning like this reflects so positively on the group, on the locker room, on the coaching staff. Take one more break. Be right back. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. You guys know the deal. We are 2 days out from one of the best weekends of the year, Championship Sunday in the NFL. I-95 showdown first. The Commanders heading up to Philly to take on the Eagles. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels, presumptive Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. 6.5-point underdogs on the road in one of the toughest environments in the entire league at Lincoln Financial. And then it doesn't get better than this. Sunday night, Bills, Chiefs, Mahomes, Josh Allen, the two best teams in the conference to go to the Super Bowl. These teams have met in the playoffs 3 previous times. All 3 times the Chiefs have prevailed. The Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites this Sunday in Arrowhead. So if you want to get in on the action for Championship Sunday, visit FanDuel.com or download the app today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. And it's really easy for a team to let outside noise get in the way. And I think you need to look no further than the team the Oilers played tonight. You look at how the Canucks season has unraveled. And look, the Canucks are 1 point out of a playoff spot right now as we sit here on January 24th. It won't take a whole lot going right for a Canucks team that was really good last year. You know, they had the Norris Trophy winner in Quinn Hughes. Thatcher Demko, when he's healthy, is a Vezina tier caliber goalie. Brock Besser can score 30. You got JT Miller, who's been a 100-point forward. You got Garland, who's a miserable pest and really effective. You've got a really good team over there, and it just hasn't worked. I think the adversity surrounding them has only amplified their issues. And I think that's really a strong point. That when teams face adversity, how they respond, that tells you who they are. You know, to quote Dodgeball, dodgeball doesn't develop character, it reveals it. And I think this season has shown you how teams respond to these difficult situations ultimately becomes the takeaway, because a lot of these games in an 82-game season, they get lost to the memory bank. You vaguely recall some, you remember individual plays, you remember the big wins, but most of these games end up getting memory hold. You know you watched them, you might be able to recall a goal scorer or two or a big save or an individual play, but unless you go back and pick through the box score and you try and find the individual sequence you're talking about, for the most part, you're not really going to recall anything off the top of your head. But when you're a guy on that team, when you're somebody who has had to spend the last 3 days getting asked questions, well, what are you guys going to do without Connor in the lineup? Do you think it's fair that Connor got suspended? How are you guys going to respond? What are you going to do against the Canucks? And I understand the media's got a job to do, but when you are guys on a team, being insular is very helpful. Being insulated from outside noise, it's really important. It is a really useful tool. And I think the fact that the Oilers came out tonight with so much juice and so much confidence to take it to the Canucks, I think that matters a lot. And I think that shows you that this group has calcified. And again, it's a long, long season. What happens now might not matter 3-4 weeks from now, but it is part of the building. It is part of the foundation. In that long season, you keep stacking up incremental positive wins. You keep stacking up wins. You have a good season, and you go from there. And the Oilers had every excuse in the book. No McDavid, team you played 3 days ago. You got the referees maybe working against you to some degree. Maybe they're working for you. But the Oilers didn't succumb to their vices. They didn't go out there trying to take Garland's head off. There was no calling up a goon from the AHL purely to try and instigate something. The Oilers got to their game. They scored. And then once they got the lead, Then they started puffing their chests out a little bit and trying to antagonize the Canucks and remind them, yeah, you might have beat us on Sunday. And yeah, Connor's not out here. We're still better than you. We know we're better than you. And we're going to spend the next 50 minutes reminding you that we're a better hockey team than you. We beat you last year in April and May. We're going to beat you again tonight. And then if we see you again later in the season, we're going to remind you we're still better than you. And that's what tonight was. Tonight was a good old-fashioned, to quote Jim Ross, this was a slobber knocker. The Oilers went out there and they whipped the Canucks like a government mule. The Canucks, at 3-0, this game was effectively over. You saw it in the body language from Thatcher Demko, the way he immediately sulked down as that third goal went by him. And look, I'm not Bill Simmons. I'm not the body language doctor, but I watch enough hockey to recognize that when a good goalie, and look, Demko, for all of his injuries, he is a fundamentally gifted athlete, and he is a really good goalie when he's locked in, I should say. When Thatcher Demko is locked in, he's a tremendous goalie, but even the greats have bad nights, and when they start sulking, they start slamming their stick, that's when you know you've got something. And I thought the Oilers really did a good job of saying, we're going to win this game. Then once we get out to a nice lead, we're going to start to get our lick back. Corey Perry is going to do every single Corey Perry thing he can possibly think of during play, before play. We're going to throw that extra hit. We're going to forecheck a little harder. We're going to make you uncomfortable and say, yeah, Connor can't be here tonight because of nonsense, but that doesn't change that we're better than you. And that's what it was tonight. This was an old school butt kicking. The Canucks, as one of my friends likes to say, they shouldn't have got off the bus tonight. It wasn't going to go well. Shouldn't have even bothered getting off the bus if this is how they were going to play. They looked disjointed. They were clunky. They were slow. The Oilers did a great job in transition of taking advantage of the fact that the Canucks have one good defenseman. And when you get a team reeling like the Canucks were tonight, it's your duty to finish it off. Well, and people will say, well, the Canucks didn't play that well. Why are you puffing your chest out? Why do you feel so good about that win if you're doing the show? And I would say, you still got to score them, man. It's not just that the other team gave you chances. If you got to finish them. This is professional sports. If you aren't on your game, even if the other team isn't, they still find a way. It doesn't take a lot. This is hockey. Weird stuff happens from time to time in hockey, and you don't even have to play well, and you can still win. But that'll just about do it for this Victory Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you happen to be listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell so you get notifications whenever new content goes live. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. See you guys then.